Be sure to follow my Twitch over at twitch.tv/Daltnix. Thank you. Hello, everybody. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at some Warlock exotics, and I'm going to be ranking them in a tier list. So let's take a look at how I'll be ranking them. Meta is at the top. This is the best Warlock exotics. That they don't get better than this. You're honestly kind of throwing a little bit if you're not running it. Good is, it's overall pretty good. Definitely not the best option by any means, but I wouldn't question you for running it. Bad is it's kind of a niche pick. You can make it work. Typically, the benefit of the exotics only happens once a game. Awful is just terrible. Don't use it. It serves no benefit to PvP, and the play that you're going for might happen once every 7,000 games. And then there's good for sixes, because some exotic are good for sixes, but aren't very good for 3v3. And for the most part, this tier list is going to be based more for 3v3 such as trials or comp, or a more competitive style of game to think your teams that are on similar skill level playing each other. If you'd like to see the Titan and Hunter one, I posted those yesterday and the day prior, link in the description for that. But without further ado, let's get into it. Starting off with Aeons. Aeons, same reason for Hunter and Titan, are actually pretty good. If you run the Sector of Vigor, if I'm not mistaken, it will make it so you will get your class ability a lot as your teammates die across the map. You'll get some of your class ability energy back, as well as reviving somebody will get it. Starting off, I think Aeons are pretty good for PvP, just with the amount of spamming your class ability. For Warlock, it is a Rift, which is super good, and depending on what class you're playing, it will do certain things, such as Void, you can get your Void Soul. For Solar, you can get the Solar Soul, so on and so forth. It can make it so you can get some pretty good amount of rifts going. But let's get right into the next one. Apotheosis Veil. This will make it so whenever you cast your super, it will give you full health and make it so all your abilities are spammable. It can be kind of fun in sixes, but it's pretty bad. Any exotic that is focused on getting your super in PvP typically isn't that good, just because you're only going to be getting 1 to maybe 2 a game. I could see maybe a play for this in sixes, but even in sixes, it's pretty bad. Astrocyte Verse, I think it's a good exotic. It buffs Blink up to be pretty good. Blink isn't necessarily the most meta ability in the world, but it is a good jump. It's great at getting away, and Astrocyte just makes that even better. Then we got the Wrathweavers, and these will make it so you'll get Frost Armor whenever you cast a Rift for you and your allies, which isn't bad, but I just said it's not bad, but I'm probably going to put it in the bad. At one point this week, do a 50 HP Overshield, which was good, but now that they've changed it into Frost Armor, it's kind of whatever, because it just doesn't really do as much for PvP as it was doing prior to the fact. Definitely a bit of more of a PvE exotic now, but it can still be okay depending on the build, but meh, it's definitely not that good. Then Boots of the Assembler is very strong if you play in a Lumina build. It constantly keeps the damage bonus with Lumina going, as well as healing your allies. Very strong exotic when built into correctly. Then we have Briarbinds, which Briarbinds will make it so your Void Soul lasts a lot longer, as well as makes it so you can re-pick it up. So another, honestly, just good exotic. Briarbinds make it so you almost always have that Void Soul and just constantly pick them up, doing increased damage. Just super good. Then Zenithal, this is just awful. Never use this. You can't get heavy, and all it's really doing is reloading your Trace Rifle, which you're not going to have a lot of ammo for anyway. Not really a reason to do this, but again, it's more of a PvE, exotic. So not really much to say about that one. Then we have Chromatic Fire, which can be fun in sixes, but overall isn't very good in any other game mode. Not really much to say. You get a hex shot with your kinetic weapon, and it does the explosion. If you use it with something like Outbreak or Ace, it can be very fun. Claws, awful. Just not a good exotic. All it does is give you an extra melee charge, and for certain classes, this can be like alright. For Void and Stasis, it's not a bad thing to get an extra melee charge. There's just exotics that kind of do what it does better. It's just a very dated exotic. Realistically, this is a Destiny 1 exotic that was pretty good, but we just have so many exotics that do such crazy things. Like, realistically, running Briarbinds, if you have a Void Soul that is constantly, going out after people, it's getting you ability regen, so you don't really need to get an extra melee charge. This is getting you all your abilities, where this is only giving you an extra melee charge. Not really worth it. Controverse Hold, just not very good. Doesn't really do a whole lot for PvP. It gets you a little bit of grenade energy back when you hit somebody with a charged grenade, but not really worth it. Then we have Crown of Tempest, which I think is really good for sixes. You can get a lot of abilities really quickly with how much you can take people down with the abilities, as well as it makes your Stormcaller last a really long time for 6v6, making it so you can get a lot of kills with it, if I'm being honest with you. And overall, it just helps you get your abilities a lot quicker for 6v6, especially if you're taking a lot of people out with your abilities. But it's definitely not the greatest for 3v3. Then we have Dawn Course, which I think it's a bad exotic. It will make it so you do some increased Scorch damage. It makes it so you get 5% of your melee energy back on every tick of a Scorch, which isn't too bad. If this made it so you could get your grenade back, this would be really, really strong with Firebolts, but the fact that it's melee is just kind of whatever. It's okay. Celestial Fire is good, but not really a whole reason to dump your whole exotic into just getting that back a little bit quicker. I have another world top tier exotic. This makes it so you get every single one of your abilities back quicker. It makes it so you will get increased airborne effectiveness by 15, as well as it will outline targets who are low with a red like outline of them, and as well as will outline guardians with their super as well as making them yellow, which is actually very beneficial. As somebody who runs this exotic a lot for my Strand Warlock build, it makes it very easy to pinpoint somebody who has their super who might just be trying to fly in and solo super you. Very, very good exotic, no matter what build you're running. Fallen Sunstar, awful. Not really going to be creating a whole lot of ionic traces for this to really be viable, so not really worth it. Same thing with Felwinter Helm, not really worth it. It could debuff enemies with your melee, which can make for some fun plays, but for the most part, pretty pointless. Geomag Stabilizers, also awful. You're not really, again, making enough ionic traces for it to really be viable. And the only time that Chaos Reach getting that increased extension is when you were trying to take out a bubble, which honestly made it pretty good for that, but bubbles are kind of whatever. And again, running a whole exotic for your super, pretty pointless. Then we have Getarators, which I'm going to say they're good. They can give you a constant supply of Amplified. It can work great with the Prismatic builds to spawn all your little buddies, including the turrets. And overall, even for Arc, just having an extra Arc buddy that goes crazy isn't bad. It can definitely make for some plays. Karnsteins, this was a really good exotic back in the day, but the fact that they changed it to Restoration instead of its own unique healing effect is great for PvE, but just made it really bad for PvP. It used to turn you into a raid boss whenever you got a kill, but the healing effect for it is just so slow now, it is not worth it. Now, Lunafaction Boots. Now, hear me out. Good for 6v6. There are some builds, such as like 2-tapping Ace and the increased range that you can get from the Empowering Rift, that is stupidly fun in 6v6. The fact that you can 2-tap with an Ace up to like 80 meters is just hilarious, and there are so many guns that benefits from the increased range of this. Very, very strong in my honest opinion. Metadoxai, and I'm sure I pronounced that wrong, but this is our new exotic. Now, I haven't really tested this one yet, so I can't really say how meta I think it is, but I'm just going to go based off of not really seeing it and it being just kind of whatever. The fact that you have to get a kill with your melee for it to proc, if it was just a melee hit and it would suspend, I think it would actually be really good. But the fact that you have to get a melee hit and then kill them or kill them with your melee to get it to proc just kind of makes it whatever. I think it could be better than awful. I'm just going to put it here for right now. I haven't really had a chance to test it out, but the Strand Warlock melees are kind of whatever in PvP, so we're just going to put it in awful just because of how bad the melees are. I might be wrong on this one, but the highest I could ever see it being is bad, if I'm being honest. And if it's bad, it's not really good. So still, meh. Maytala Battle Army is an interesting one. This one can get crazy amount of weapon damage, but the big thing that I think is so strong about this is that you can get a lot of super energy for this. If you are getting a lot of kills with a weapon matching your subclass, I think it's actually not terrible. It's not the most meta pick by any means, but it doesn't really benefit you a whole lot, especially if you're not getting a whole lot of kills. So it can be good for 6v6, honestly, but I'm still just going to put it in the bad. I don't even really think it's that good for 6v6, if we're being honest. Necrotic Grip, such an amazing exotic for PvE, but it's not terrible. It can add some extra poison, and depending on your build, especially if you're running, like Stormcaller or Prismatic, where you're going to be sliding with all those arc melees and chaining a bunch of poison, can be very, very good for that, but nothing super crazy other than that. Nizorak Sin, if you're using a Void weapon, it's not bad. Actually gets you a lot of ability energies as long as you're using, a Void weapon. Like I said, obviously a Void ability kills work too, but to really utilize it, I would recommend using a Void weapon. More abilities at the end of the day is just better no matter what. Then we have Nothing Manacles. Nothing Manacles is a terrible exotic. It actually makes your scatter grenades worse. So you're making your scatter grenades worse, but then getting a second one, not really a need for that. Like it just don't run this. Please never run this exotic. Scatter grenades are good, and this makes them kind of not good. Then we have Ophidian Aspects, S tier. Not really much to say here. they make every weapon feel amazing and get airborne effectiveness. One of the best exotics in the entire game, to the point that pretty much the reason you run an exotic class item on the other two classes is to get Ophidian aspects. And then second exotic in a row, S tier. Osmiomancy gloves are amazing for cold snaps. It makes them such a threat. The tracking on them is crazy. Getting 2 of them, getting them back even quicker whenever they hit, just stupidly strong. Phoenix Protocol at one point actually was kind of a fun build to run in 6s, just because you'd get a chunk of super energy back, especially if you were in some lower skill lobbies. People would just keep challenging the well. But since well got nerfed, well is still good, but it's pretty bad. I would not recommend running it. Prometheum Spur, again, just a terrible exotic. Do not run these things. Really, really bad. And then we have Rain of Fire, which pairing this with Vex Mythoclast just makes them a really good exotic. Not to mention never really having to reload, because every time you Icarus Dash, you will reload all your guns. Just a very solid pick, especially if you're playing a fusion rifle oriented build. Sanguine Alchemy just gives you increased damage essentially when you're in your Empowering Rift, which is pretty good because it can actually make it so it can push certain weapons over certain thresholds to get a 2-tapped or a 1-tap, so whatever it may be. So if you're really building into it, it's not an awful pick, but I'd still say it's not the greatest pick in the world. Now, Sanguine Filaments. I think this is an amazing exotic. Personally, for me, I'd put it, if it's 6v6, I'd say it's like meta, but just for normal 3v3, I'm going to put it in good tier. But these are one of the best exotics in the game. Getting Devour every time you cast your Rift is super strong, and Devour in 6v6 just goes crazy. But in 3v3, it is still very, very strong. Skull of Dire Kara, terrible. Terrible. So just don't run it. Then we have Speaker's Sight, which is going in the S tier. Now, Bungie did say today, actually, of the recording of this video, that they are removing the orb generation from it. But in my opinion, I don't think that's going to knock this thing out of the meta. It's not like it's going to go from being meta to being bad. The amount of healing that you get from this thing is just ridiculous. Just because it lost the orb, it's still going to be the top of the food chain. It is still the best Warlock exotic in the game by far. Starfire Protocol, it's pretty bad. Not really a reason to run this ever. It gives you double fusion nades. That's pretty much the reason that you'd run it, which fusion nades are strong, but there's definitely better exotics that can get you more fusion grenade energy than Starfire. Then we have Storm Dancer. This pretty much just buffs your Stormcaller super damage. Awful. Don't run it. Really, really bad. Then we have Sunbracers, which honestly can be super funny in 6s, if I'm being honest with you. The fact that you can get a melee kill and you can start just spamming out solar grenades, it's not very practical, but it's good and fun in 6s. Swarmers, they're pretty useless, if I'm being honest with you. Any strand build that you're running, I Have Another World is better. Getting the buffs from these just doesn't really do a whole lot for you, if I'm being honest, in PvP. Great for PvE. Love them in PvE, but for PvP, meh. The Stag, actually a good pick. Stag gives you damage reduction when you're in your Rift, making it so it's almost impossible to die, honestly, unless if you like really overcommit. And then it makes it so you can get a lot of Rift energy back, which is super good because it gives you Rift energy whenever you're critically wounded. At one point, this was an insane amount and would give you like 50%, but now it gives you 25%. Getting critically wounded and getting 25% of your class ability energy back for free is pretty crazy. Not to mention when you die, you also drop a class ability as well for your teammates, so you are still helping them even after somebody has taken you out. Just honestly, a super underrated exotic. Transversive Steps, S tier, making it so you almost never need to reload, plus the increased speed. Something paired with Icarus Dash is just insane. You just go at Mach 10, and it is crazy. And then we have Verities, which Verities it's bad, but it's not terrible, which is good, because it gives you a lot of your grenade energy back just from getting weapon kills, and the increased damage can actually take over the threshold depending on how many stacks you get, and it can make fusion grenades one shot. It can make other grenades do a lot of damage. Just overall a very good exotic if you like, throwing a lot of grenades. Vesper is awful, doesn't really do anything for you in PvP, just makes it so you can, get that shockwave and it blinds. And I've used it a little bit, and you get an occasional kill here and there, or it can prevent people from pushing occasionally, but overall, just kind of meh. Wings of Sacred Dawn. Now, honestly, this one makes it so you fly in the air and gives you a damage reduction, so I don't think it's bad, but I also don't think it's good. And I think it's tailoring more so on the bad than good, just because its heat rises overall is just better. And I can see a play for this, and depending on what map or the type of player you are, it can be good. I think if you get really good at using it, you can make it a good pick. But for most people, I would say it's just bad. Then we have Winter Gale, which can be fun in 6s. You just run around and one-punch people. Pretty fun, but nothing super meta by any means. And then just like the Hunter and Titan one. The class ability I'm going to put in S tier just because there's so many combinations and some of them are just really, really strong. And at the end of the day, you can just put Ophidian aspects with another thing on. Granted, Ophidians, you are missing out on stuff such as the reload and the inner effectiveness. So depending on what you value, Ophidians might just be better than this. But overall, the class item is still really, really good. And because of all the different combinations, it's an S tier. But this is my Warlock tier list. I think if you use any one of these at the top, you will be successful in endgame PvP, or at least have a good fighting chance. These ones down here can, depending on the build, can be, all right. And then these ones, which is a lot of them, if I'm being honest with you, are just terrible. And I would never consider using them in the current state of PvP. They would need some pretty substantial buffs to really, really be good. And then these 6s ones, again, good for 6s, can be a lot of fun, but I wouldn't really state that they're super meta. But if you did enjoy the video, please remember to like and subscribe, as it does help out with the channel a lot. And let me know how I did on the tier list. I'm sure someone will tell me that I put their favorite exotic in the awful tier and how I'm crazy for it. Thank you guys so much, and have a good rest of your day.